At the heart of the prevailing social vision of our times is the seemingly invincible fallacy that group outcomes in human endeavors would tend to be equal, or at least comparable or random, if there were no biased interventions.
Yes.
And explain that for us.
Well, empirically, it is the easiest way to explain it. Almost nowhere, anywhere in the world, or at any period of history, do you find any society in which groups that compete openly end up with the same results. As on the genetic side, by the way, there's a study of families where one of the kids becomes a National Merit Scholarship finalist. In 5-child families, the firstborn becomes the finalist more times than the other 4 siblings combined. Now that's not genetic. There are other.
It's also not discrimination. It's just luck, birth order, the luck of the draw.
Well, but it's more than that. It tells us something about the importance of parental attention in the development of a child. And that's also reinforced by the fact that twins tend to average several points lower IQ than people born singly, because obviously neither twin ever gets the full attention of the parents. And also, backing that up is that where one of the twin is either stillborn or dies shortly after birth, the other twin has an average IQ much closer to the norm.
I see. Okay, so the point here is we eliminate the argument from racism, which leaves us with the argument from discrimination. And what you're saying is, no, look at example after example after example where we know in more or less controlled experiments, families with 5 kids, twins, and so forth, that there are factors that have nothing to do with justice or injustice, but that are simply happenstance. That's the argument?
Yes. It's also true in 4-child families, 3-child families, 2-child families.
Oh.
It is true in Britain and Norway and a number of other countries where there have been huge tests done.
All right. So, again, I'm going to take discrimination and disparities to bring it to American society. It might seem strange, you're right, that during the 19th century of mass immigration from Europe to the United States, it was not uncommon to find Jewish and Italian neighborhoods in New York represented by Irish politicians, a situation that did not change until well into the 20th century. How could this have been?
Because if you look at the history of the 3 groups, it's clear that the Irish had a lot more political experience in Europe before any of them ever set foot on American soil. I mean, it's really, when you think of how many factors there are at work, it's incredible to think that they're going to work out the same for almost any group defined any way.
Got it.
The other thing, it's so frustrating. I can come up with umpteen different examples of disparities in various situations, including situations where it is not possible for it to be either discrimination or genetics. People on the other side cannot give you one example. You can read reams of paper by advocates of social justice and not find one example anywhere in the world. There are people who've done international studies. Braudel, I quote, the French historian. He said, in no society has all parts of the population had the same outcomes.
All right. You note also, by the way, that even within, this I found striking, even within socioeconomic bands or strata, that is people who, or ethnic groups that are actually doing pretty well, there are differences that can be striking. And to quote you again, Jews have been especially well represented in retailing, finance, and garment production, but by no means equally well represented in heavy industries such as the production of steel or automobiles.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do, we're not talking about relative disadvantage here. They rose to success in different fields from, I don't know, Andrew Carnegie, I guess, is a Scot who's doing steel, and Ford and the Dodge brothers are what, Northern European stock who handle automobiles, and it just worked out that way for no invidious reason.
Yes.
All right. Again, I'm going to quote you, but I'm going to get more than a yes out of you, Tom, on this one. Statistical underrepresentation or overrepresentation of various groups is not peculiar to the United States or to our times. For centuries, there have been countries where most members of various professions and most business owners in whole industries have been members of some subordinate minority. All right, you present a couple of examples. Let's take a couple of examples. The overseas Chinese in Southeast Asia.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about them.
Oh, my gosh. Some people call them the Jews of Southeast Asia. Considering the numbers involved, you might call the Jews the Chinese of Eastern Europe. But there are country after country where over half of the retail outlets are by people who are Chinese. I mean, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, whatnot. There are countries after countries where most of the billionaires are Chinese.
Outside China.
Oh, outside China. And this, one of the other things, too, is this ties in to some extent with a genetic thing. As of 1994, there were 57 million overseas Chinese and 1 billion people in China. The 57 million produced as much wealth as the billion people in China.
All right. Jews in Eastern Europe, as another example of a subordinate group.
Yes.
Tell us about them.
It's very common for retailing in many parts of Eastern Europe to be largely in the hands of Jews. Greatly overrepresented in universities. By the late 19th century, 1/3 the people at the University of Vienna were Jews, and they were usually the more successful students.
Right. Indians in East Africa.
Oh my gosh. And here you see something that ties in with a desire to confiscate the wealth of the wealthy. They did that in Uganda. The people from India and Pakistan dominated modern industry in that country. Eventually, of course, the politicians decided that they should be expropriated. They were expropriated. They were sent out, not allowed to take any wealth with them of any significance. And all the stuff that was left there, their businesses and so forth, went to the Ugandan. The Ugandan economy collapsed. These people arrived destitute, mostly in England. And within a decade, they were on their way to prosperity again. The same thing with the Cubans here, that when Castro took over.
Castro takes over in 1959, 1 million Cubans leave with almost nothing.
Yes, and he left behind all the wealth they had in Cuba. You fast forward a half a century, and the Cuban-American businesses in the United States had a revenue that was larger than the revenue of the entire nation of Cuba. Even though, and they weren't, in the United States, they weren't driving 1950s cars in the 21st century.
All right. All right. So the underlying assumption, just to close up the argument here, the underlying assumption of the social vision, the vision of social justice, that absent discrimination, roughly equal outcomes will prevail, is refuted by every page of recorded history.
Yeah. In the end of the 15th century, Spain decided to expel all Jews, and as often happens these days, they're not allowed to take any wealth with them. And so they go to various places, including the Netherlands. And over time, they again rise to prosperity in the Netherlands, helping to increase the Netherlands economy. The Huguenots in France were being persecuted. They flee to England and Switzerland, and they take their skills with them. Now, prior to that time, France was big. There was no watch industry in England prior to the arrival of the Huguenots. So now the British could buy their watches from London instead of from France. And moreover, the London watchmakers could compete in the international market with the French watchmakers. And in Switzerland, this is what helped Switzerland to become and remain to this day the dominant watchmaking country in the world. I mean, you can't confiscate the source of their wealth. You can confiscate, and although I didn't go into it in this book, this is true of people who want to do this on a local community level. I mean, you know, Detroit was once a prosperous place. They followed policies that drove the prosperous people out, and then of course they had to leave all their businesses and so forth in Detroit. That was of no use without the people who knew how to operate it. Mm. Those people, I'm sure, have done much better. Detroit has never fully recovered from that.
Mm. So the idea here is you can confiscate wealth
It's already existing.
You can confiscate
wears
material
out.
goods. Yes,
Yes.
yes. But what point is it? All right. So again, I'm going to quote the book once again. Physical wealth is a product of human capital. The knowledge, skills, talents, and other qualities that exist inside the heads of people where it cannot be confiscated.
Yes.
Closed quote.
Social justice is an actual impediment to acquiring human capital, because what it tells you is that the reason you have less is because people have malevolently kept you from having access to all the good things in life. And if that's the case, why in the world should you knock yourself out, learn a whole new culture, develop whole sets of skills and so forth, sacrificed in the present for the future, when it's going to mean nothing? Two of the stories I've heard that really pains me greatly, a couple of young black guys, there's two different guys and two different sets of stories, expressed a desire to become a pilot. And they say, I thought about joining the Air Force, but I realized that the white people are not going to let me become a pilot. And they're saying this after there was a whole squadron of black fighter pilots in World War II, and after there have been black generals in the Air Force. But this vision that they're bombarded with tells them that that's not possible. That something that's already happened is not possible.
So the notion that you've been wrong,
yes,
has the effect of what? Of encouraging passivity?
No, resentment, but not. Because social mobility is not some easy thing. I don't know if you read the book about the Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh yes. J.D. Vance.
Yes,
Vance, right.
And what a trauma it is for him.
It was hard.
To come out of his background and achieve something in the world. Why in the world would you put yourself through that if you thought that at the end of it all, they're going to say, no, we're not going to let you fly any of our planes, damn it.
Right. And also, if you think you've been wronged, your recourse might also be more likely to politics, to try to redress this whole redistribution,
yes. Oh, yes.
rather than hit the books, acquire the skills, get the job.
But the other thing too, one of my favorite statistic in there is that the poverty rate among blacks as a whole is 22%. Among whites as a whole is 11%. And among black married couples is 7.5%. And black married couples have never had a poverty rate as high as 10% in any year since 1994.
All right. So to the cry, what is to be done? Tom Sowell answers,
it's been done.